Okay, I'm doing the third article, Culturally Appropriate Positive Guidance with Young Children. And the name of the author is Zeynep Isaac Erkin. 3-year-old Tristan is singing to a rag doll in the dramatic play area, pretending to rock her to sleep. Anna, also 3, snatches the doll from Tristan's hands. Anna says, "Baby wants sleep." Upset, Tristan says, "It's my baby. I am rocking her to sleep." Anna insists that the baby needs to be under the blanket, and she lies down with the doll for a second, then jumps up to close the blinds. At first glance, a teacher may view this situation as a behavioral issue. Anna needs to understand that no one can take another's toy without permission. While the behavior is important to address, Anna and Tristan's teacher, Ms. Jones, is also aware the young children have a deep understanding of their own cultural routines and a strong desire to follow those routines. While acknowledging that Anna's method was not appropriate, Ms. Jones realizes that Anna was trying to prevent an uncomfortable situation for the baby by putting her to sleep according to her routine in Anna's home, lying down with the baby in a quiet, dark room. To help all of her students understand that everyone has different cultural practices at home, that all of them are to be respected, Ms. Jones decides to begin an exploration of the different ways children and families go to sleep. And I think what's important here is that she's just saying families have different routines, different ways of approaching things. The ethnicity of the children is really not mentioned. So, culturally appropriate means understanding each individual child and who they are and their family and how that impacts who they are in the classroom. All right. So she started to examine how the ways children and families go to sleep. She searches for children's literature focused on how people go to sleep and chooses where babies sleep by James Mollison, How Cowboys Sleep with Their Boots On by Lori Knowlton, illustrated by James Rice, and The Napping House by Audrey Wood, illustrated by Don Wood. As Miss Jones reads these books aloud, she supports the children in exploring the illustrations and comparing their home routines with those in the books. To broaden the discussion, Miss Jones shows them the photographs she found online that depict the bedtime rituals of children from various countries. So many of these photos show how weather, house size, and type and parenting practices influence the ways children go to sleep. Within a few days, Miss Jones and the children carry the investigation into the dramatic play area, where they pretend to put babies to sleep in hammocks, body wraps, cribs, beds, and sleeping bags, either alone or with dolls representing parents or siblings. Although it's not possible to transform every incident into an enriching investigation, teachers of children ages 2 to 6 would do well to follow in Miss Jones's footsteps. Many behaviors have cultural roots that teachers can capitalize to foster each child's developing identity, whose cultural lessons, share cultural lessons with the whole class and help children cultivate shared norms for their behavior as students. Research on the experiences of culturally and linguistically diverse young children in early childhood settings implies that what Ms. Jones faced is fairly common. Some guidance challenges are based on differences between home and school practice. Teachers like Ms. Jones recognize that some conflicts among children reflect the children's early understanding of their own cultural scripts, family and community practices, and rituals for how things are done, and their limited understanding of others' scripts. As teachers provide positive, developmentally appropriate guidance for a particular behavior, they consider the issue through the lens of cultural appropriateness, an important dimension of developmentally appropriate practice. This lens may encompass family traditions, religious beliefs, community etiquette, social class, and contextual differences such as urban, rural, and suburban practices, any of which may be a source of possible conflict between children. As they choose guidance strategies, teachers help children understand that their peers' play and behavior may look and feel different from their own because of different cultural practices, and they support children as they gradually learn to negotiate different sets of expectations between home and early childhood settings. Early childhood educators may find that expectations of some children and families they serve do not fit their framework for positive guidance. Culturally appropriate positive guidance requires educators to understand and mediate differing views on child guidance between home and school contexts. And then it goes, the next section is called Understanding Family Perspectives and Goals for Child Development. One important aspect of child development is children's increasing adoption of and participate in family and community routines and practices. Some cultural practices, such as authoritarian parenting styles, may seem to conflict with an education program's philosophy and curriculum or with a practitioner's own perspective. However, by respecting families' viewpoints and contexts, practitioners support family cohesion, which is an essential aspect of social and emotional development in young children, especially children whose home culture might be very different from the typical U.S. school culture. Young children benefit when teachers and families establish healthy partnerships and define common goals or developmental outcomes for children. When early childhood practitioners inquire about particular family practices, they are likely to find that both parties have many similar goals, including helping children develop skills such as social competency, altruism, sharing, collaboration, respect, and confidence. While these goals look similar across cultural contexts, the tools and methods each party uses for positive guidance might look quite different. Therefore, practitioners may need to engage with families in collaboration problem solving when conflicts arise. Rather than apply one guidance method for all children, the following example illustrates how Mr. Garcia, a preschool teacher, used culturally appropriate guidance. When 5-year-old Yen Ting sees 4-year-old Max playing with a cereal and dropping it on the floor, Yen Ting quietly says, "Shame on you." Max shouts, "Go away!" Yen Ting is upset by Max's reaction. He was reminding Max about the no playing with food rule like an older brother might. Max, offended by the intrusion into his privacy, thinks Yen Ting should not reprimand him as he is not an authority figure. This is a lot for a 3-year-old to think, right? Anyway, this exchange reveals the differences in the cultural perspectives these children have gained in their family contexts. Mr. Garcia is knowledgeable about both families' expectations for their children. For example, from conversations with Yen Ting's family, he knows that saving face to avoid public shame and preserve group harmony is an important Confucian principle. Instead of bringing both children together to address the issue, a common conflict resolution technique, Mr. Garcia discreetly speaks individually to the children to help each understand the other's perspective. He explains to Max that Yen Ting is trying to be considerate by quietly reminding him of a rule. And he tells Yen Ting that even though he was whispering, his words sounded harsh to Max. Mr. Garcia suggests that in the future, Max consider whether his classmates are trying to help him. And Yen Ting considers saying, "If you drop food on the floor will be dirty and wet." And let Max make the choice. Although the boys did not engage in conflict resolution in this instance, they are now more aware of each other's intentions. When they use culturally appropriate positive guidance, practitioners like Mr. Garcia support the development of children's bicultural identities, honoring both their family and community context and their school context. Some home practices are directly associated with the core of children's cultural identity and so should be respected. By respecting such practices, even when not agreeing with them, educators promote children's healthy social and emotional growth. In offering guidance, Mr. Garcia protected the family's position as primary caregivers and guides in their children's social and emotional growth, as suggested in the NAEYC Code of Conduct, in particular IDLI 2.6, to acknowledge families' child rearing values and their right to make decisions for their children. And then we're going to go into understanding family practices that clash with center principles. Because sometimes you can't really do group care and respect a family cultural practice. Like, it's not possible to take care of children in a group and do it. So I think that's what this chart's going to get to. So some family practices may pose guidance challenges in early learning programs. And the family cultural practice is spoon feeding toddlers while sharing stories and songs with them, not allowing young toddlers to practice self feeding. I think there's some centers that won't let them sing during lunch because they might choke. I'm not sure about that. And then performing physical care tasks and practices for children, such as tying their shoes or putting the coats on them. And in group care, we're often working on autonomy. And so we teach them how to do it themselves because it's very hard to get 10 or more kids ready. The center principle says encouraging young children self-care practices, and self-help skills to foster independence. It's part of our curriculum. And then interpretations of a family practice, that spilling and wasting food, which is, so that's the way they're perceiving what the center does. They believe that if you're letting children spill and waste food, that's unacceptable and disrespectful of people's efforts and nature's bounty. Animals live in the food chain. So allowing self-feeding and the amount of waste that goes into that would be very offensive to some families. And then it says feeding rituals and other physical care customs are essential elements in establishing physical and emotional attachment between caregiver and child, and are shared cultural rituals that signify love. So helping their baby or their child tie their shoes, get dressed, like that's a part of their relationship. And so forcing families, or thinking you have any right to force families to do what they do at school, is kind of taking something that they perceive as a special part of their relationship. Then there's a case study on the next page, which is page 30. It says using sociocultural conflicts among children as teachable moments. And I'm not going to read this out loud. This might be a part of an assignment I'm going to have you do, and then we can all weigh in on it. It says making a program structure more accommodating. Another way to encompass varying perspectives on child guidance is to provide a flexible program structure that accommodates individual needs. For instance, children who come from homes where their schedules flow with natural rhythms of their attention span and engagement, and with their own awareness of their physical needs, might struggle in a more structured classroom environment. Simple arrangements such as making a snack available at a corner table where children can sit whenever they need a break might offer a natural respite and a sense of control for children who might be frustrated with and resistant to what they perceive as unnatural transitions or abrupt changes. So sometimes kids are allowed to graze at home, but then when they come to school, and childcare centers, early childhood classrooms tend to have very specific routines. Sometimes that's because you have to go out at a certain time or you won't get a chance to go outside. Sometimes you have a person who is cooking the food, so you want to eat it when it is prepared. And some classrooms can be very rigid about allowing children to detour from that. Sometimes children who don't finish everything on their plate then aren't allowed to get snacks or seconds. Or if you already threw your stuff away and then you realized you were hungry, things like that. I used to work at a childcare center where if you took a second helping, you had to finish it or your lunch was not done. Your meal was not done. And they would make the kids sit there like through nap, and I do not agree with it, because I think one of the hardest things for me as an adult, as a human, is to only eat when I'm hungry. And if I'm forcing children, I'm not letting children make a mistake identifying whether they're hungry or not, and then I'm forcing them to eat when they're not hungry, I'm creating all sorts of wonderful room for food issues, right? Or eating disorders or whatever. I'm not saying that everybody's going to have an eating disorder, but these kind of messages that don't really make sense when we really want children to learn how to tell what their body needs and to do what's healthy, send mixed messages. Send, how could we figure out what to do? All right, children's flexibility and resilience in negotiating multiple learning contexts. So, When it comes to forming bicultural identities, children are remarkably adaptable. For example, a case study of a preschool classroom found that although teachers and parents of culturally diverse children held different beliefs and practices about literacy learning, appropriate language for interactions, and social norms, the children were successful in navigating both the home and classroom contexts and were able to like code switch at a very young age. So children learn and know what's expected in each environment. They use strategies such as following the peer culture rules they observed when entering ongoing play or showing their knowledge of the alphabet so that other children sought out their knowledge and showed greater acceptance of them. Most young children became skilled at analyzing the cultural codes and expectations in the classroom. In fact, growing research evidence suggests that children's understanding of others affects their behavior in positive ways, leading to greater acceptance by peers. Rather than anticipate sociocultural conflict among children when cultural incongruences arise, children can observe and build on children's established and emerging abilities to adjust to different contexts. So instead of saying everybody has to do everything the same way and be treated exactly the same way, there's room for flexibility. And we'll see this, or we already have seen it, in situations where Vivian Paley is giving us anecdotes about the children, right? Different children, children understand that different children need different things, and they're okay with that. Most children don't get morally outraged that maybe one person gets to do something because that's what that kid needs. So it kind of depends on how the teacher really presents it. The teacher is the facilitator of the environment and the expectations and the climate of the room. All right. Understanding peer culture and fostering classroom community. Peer culture. And so I'm finding culture is here everywhere, and I feel like it's such a politicized word. But really all it is how they live their life in that specific place in their life. So there's a classroom culture, there's a family culture. It's not this really heavy word that some people may be making it out to be. We really just want to help them understand that different people do things different ways. It's not saying Chinese people do it this way and black people do it this way and white people do it this way. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that there's a peer culture, a classroom culture, right? And I'm sure ethnicity does play into it sometimes, but that's not the limit of what culture is. So, peer culture, the stable set of routines, artifacts, values, and concerns that children produce and share with each other, is an important component of classroom culture. Teachers may gain valuable insights when they examine various elements of the peer culture in their classrooms and use children's actions to establish positive guidance. So one study noted that when provided with autonomy to do so, preschool children first monitor and regulate their peers' behavior before they turn to themselves and apply the same strategies. So that's sort of interesting. I think if I'm reading that right, it means they're going to tell on everybody else and point out all this other stuff before they realize, oh, I got to do that too. But let's see. And apply the same strategies, aligning with Vygotsky's statement that mental skills begin as social processes and then become internalized. Social interaction with peers during play provides children with necessary feedback to reconsider their actions, even though their home practices might be different. Chen documented children's flexibility to use feedback gathered from those peer interactions. For example, a child might ask a group of children several times to play with them and routinely be told no. Over time, the child may observe that incorporating a toy or adding a proper character to the play without directly asking for permission may work better, creating a safe space in which children can monitor each other and thus better internalize guidance expectations helps foster a close-knit classroom community. These kids are pretty smart. So, when practitioners attend to the peer culture in their classrooms, they may notice that children are curious to explore their peers' beliefs and behavior norms, which at times might lead to what may seem like discriminatory behavior, and when not addressed to guidance challenges. For example, when Susan, who was new to preschool, shouted to her peers, "No beer, no boys allowed in our kitchen," she was drawing on roles she was familiar with, a homemaker woman and a breadwinner man. Having gotten to know Susan, her teacher saw that she was thinking through these roles and wanted to provoke the boys to see if they agreed with them. When practitioners understand children's curiosity and the challenge of digesting multiple viewpoints, they may be encouraged to provide space for children to explore differences and variations in social or individual practices through dramatic play. Instead of viewing differences as offending and limiting, hello, America, this crucial time for children to negotiate their actions and beliefs. And when we read Vivian Paley, I feel like there's a lot of heavy words in here and big words, behavior norms, and this, that, and the other thing. And what I love about Paley is it's very down to earth and it's anecdotal, relaying examples of children's behavior. And then it says in the conclusion, for many children, preschool is their first significant opportunity to learn about routines and behaviors that are different from their home life. Keep in mind that differences in cultural routines can be just as hard, if not harder, to adjust to as differences in when and where children are eating and napping. To examine their cultural assumptions, educators should challenge themselves by taking another colleague's or a family's perspective on child guidance. Agreement may not always be possible, but understanding and respect can always go. As practitioners develop their cultural knowledge, they will be better able to identify opportunities for learning, just as Ms. Jones and Mr. Garcia did. So I do want to look back at the case study to see if we should really talk about it. So I'm on 30 again, and it says guidance challenges stemming from cultural and linguistic diversity can be viewed as opportunities for practitioners to address children's growing social abilities. An early childhood practitioner can help culturally diverse children understand norms and social expectations by mediating peer relationships. The following story illustrates such a process. So, 4-year-old Abdi was a newly arrived refugee from Somalia, and on his first day at a church-located early childhood center, he ran wildly down a hallway, followed by his mother, who was attempting to stop him. Teachers were startled to see a child making so much noise and running freely in the orderly and quiet learning environment. Interacting with Abdi in the following days, Ms. Miller, the preschool pre-service teacher, and I learned that he was extremely nervous in his new all-white preschool and wanted to leave, so running seemed to him like a really good solution. By the following week, however, Abdi was settling in and following directions and seeming more at ease with his peers. Miss Miller and I often observed Abdi gently touching his friends on their shoulder and heads while participating in whole group games and engaging in rough and tumble play on the playground, and sometimes to his peers' dismay. Miss Miller and I worked with Abdi and his peers to explore social expectations in his new environment. For example, Abdi's peers had a much larger sphere of personal space than Abdi was accustomed to, so he would often talk more closely or touch more often than they preferred. And although his peers protected each other's personal space, they could not explain to Abdi how or why they felt he was violating it, because they're pretty young. Being careful to not put Abdi on the spot, Miss Miller and I facilitated this negotiation of personal space by helping all the children understand some expectations in our early childhood classroom. We discussed and role-played rules about private space, noise level expectations, and limited physical contact. Using persona dolls and storylines that children developed and explored, we guided the children's discussion of how, why, and when touching friends may or may not be a good idea in the school setting and other settings. Like Miss Jones' investigation of sleeping routines, we explored the notion of personal space as a fascinating cultural difference, not as something that could be right or wrong. We also helped children understand that some nonverbal clues, such as smiling, making eye contact, may in certain contexts mean discomfort rather than agreement or contentment. These practices provided children with tools to notice subtle cues before unwelcome interactions turned into negative reactions. At the same time, in collaboration with the classroom teacher, Miss Miller and I helped the individual children who were most reactive to Abdi realize that when Abdi kept touching a child, it meant he was showing his affection for and interest in that child. Discussing differences in children's actions supported all children's general perspective-taking abilities in the next week, and we observed several children explaining to each other what a peer meant when they said or did something that might be misunderstood. I've definitely been in a situation where I'm not a hugger and I don't want to be hugged. And I've also, even though I get that on such a personal level, been the person that as soon as I don't think someone wants me to hug them, for some reason it's like a reflex, like, oh, I feel like this need to be like, oh, you did such a great job. And it's a hard thing, I think, for everybody. So imagine young children trying to figure this out. So I sort of appreciate this article, honestly. And then I haven't read through the questions, but I'll probably see if I can word them in a way that'll be useful for us. Okay. All right. Thank you.